short conversation with Dr. Shumeet Banerji, the global CEO of Booz Company. Dr. Banerji, this afternoon you delivered a speech about the era of state in financial institutions. How long does it take, in your opinion, until the banking system will work again without substantial government funding?
I think it's too early to tell. And I don't actually think that we've seen the bottom of this yet. I think that we may have, and I think that we're all optimistic that the sense we have that things are not falling anymore, is real. But I still think it's too early to tell. I think that there are very significant issues in terms of the restructuring of the financial system, not just banks. Three major things have to happen. There has to be significant effort on isolating and properly valuing the bad assets. Corresponding to that, there needs to be significant effort around the recapitalization of these institutions. And third, that there has to be more systematic confidence in lending, which typically the state has done in past crises through guaranteeing credit. There's more progress in guaranteeing credit than there is on the other two aspects. And I think different countries have approached the questions slightly differently. But till we know what the scale of the bad assets problem really is, that there is a real mechanism by which to isolate and then recapitalize, because obviously as soon as you take a write-down on these assets, you have to find the capital to cover the position. We don't really know. And I think it's a matter of several years. It's not a matter of months.
Okay. Much of this crisis was caused by a massive over-leverage in the credit system and excessive debt. Now, governments, on a very general level, they try to fight the crisis with even more debt. How should this work?
Well, I think it's important to differentiate between liquidity, leverage, and the use of debt. So I think that without any question, there is a significant amount of state leveraging that's going on right now, and I think that is going to have quite significant consequences down the road. We are seeing countries that have had quite stable macroeconomic policies, such as the UK, for example, with debt levels of about 40% of GDP, which is doubling in a very short period of time. And that will place enormous burdens on these countries over the horizon of the next 10 to 20 years, because these debt levels cannot be paid down quickly. Also, there are pressing social problems that also demand money. For example, with aging populations, in much of Europe. So, unfortunately, I think that the persistence of the national debt problem will be for quite some time. However, I think the second part of the problem, which the leverage in financial institutions led to, which was the acquisition of these, collateralized debt obligations, essentially asset-backed securities, is not a feature of what we're seeing right now. So there isn't that aspect of risk. But yes, generally speaking, macroeconomic risks, in my mind, are quite substantial around excessive debt.
You're now taking part in a panel on the social and moral implications of the economic crisis. How does this crisis affect the lives and the morale of people beyond economic impact?
Well, I think that there are probably two areas that are of significant concern. I think that in major economies in Europe and North America, we're seeing very, very sharp increases in unemployment. So the lives of everyday people, who have nothing to do with CDOs and CDSs and so on and so forth, are very directly affected. And I think that some of this has been masked by the fact that many companies have taken unprecedented steps to actually reduce the wage bill. So not only is it that there are unemployed people, but also incomes are contracting. And for many citizens in the US or elsewhere, there has been a very substantial decline in net worth. So I'm not talking about wealthy people, I'm just talking about everyday people. If you had some amount of money in the stock markets or in real estate, these are all things that have contracted 20, 30, 40%. So there's a real wealth effect as well. So that's one level of the problem, which is just people are, there is a lot of suffering as a result of these sorts of things. I suppose the other aspect of this is that many of the certainties that have governed the way we think about the world, the primacy of market forces, the general approach to solving problems by the state, which has been to restrict itself to areas like the macroeconomy, regulation, and looking after the poor and vulnerable, all of a sudden the role of the state has expanded very rapidly in many countries. And it remains to be seen what is the new ideological equilibrium that emerges at the end of all this. So these are substantial questions.
What is your message to the student participants of this symposium? What will they inherit from the crisis, and how should they prepare themselves for their future responsibility for society and the economy?
You know, I think that it's a tough time for students. I think that you will emerge into the world with very tight labor market conditions, and that creates problems after having spent many years as a student acquiring an education. To have the difficulties in the job market are a real problem. Equally, though, I think that 2 or 3 years ago you would get students who otherwise would have wanted to do other things, who were attracted, for example, into financial markets because it was the thing to do and it seemed like a very lucrative profession. My advice to students is this is a very good time to focus on what is your purpose. What do you want to do in life? And seek stepping stones towards that future. Because at the end of the day, real satisfaction in a career comes from doing something that you really feel fits your moral compass and your skills and your aspirations. And so your first step out of school may not be exactly where you want to land, but nobody's career follows a simple map from A to B. Instead, think of your long-run purpose. What are you really here to do? Speak to people who you trust and admire. Gain advice. Find a good mentor. And take the first step in that direction.
Okay, Dr. Banerji, thank you very much for your time. Thank you.